Dan Livingston to we are handout rich. To first do a short presentation on the current state of play with retirement, and then also to have plenty of time for questions and answers. So I just want to remind you, first of the chapter elections for chapter officers are currently ongoing. You can vote until next Monday for representatives to the CSU AAP Council from CCSU, which is it's an important role because we help make decisions about the overall relation of CSU AAP toward the system office, which is an important topic at this time of reorganization. The second thing I wanted to remind you of is that our next chapter meeting is currently scheduled for the first Monday in May. The Senate President, Blight Her Eyes, has called a bonus Senate meeting for that day as well. So there may be some schedule adjustment that needs to happen. I'll wrestle with Candace later. Okay. And then the third thing I wanted to do was to thank all of you who came out last week for the Occupy CCSU rally in support of public funding for tuition at the university. It was highly successful. You'll see a story about it on the current page of the Recorder and so forth, and there are pictures online everywhere. That having been said, most of you are probably here today to hear about retirement plans and the various options that are percolating around. So without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Dan Livingston.
See, I learn something new every time I come here. I had not known the phrase bonus Senate meeting. I'm a little scared about what that means, but I now learned it. I'm going to take only a real couple of minutes. I think the main purpose of my being here is to answer any questions you all have. But just a couple of minutes of background. I spoke here, what was it, Steve, a year or two ago about the SAG award. Right? And now I'm here talking primarily about the hybrid plan. And I want to talk to you about what the hybrid plan stands for and then what the various options that you all have in front of you are. The hybrid plan, to understand the hybrid plan, you need to understand the basic differences between the typical types of pension and retirement opportunities that are available to higher ed professional employees in the state. We have historically had two very different sort of opposite kinds of plans. We had the service plans, which are defined benefit plans, and you all know what those are. It means that you put in a certain contribution that may be required under the plan. The employer puts in whatever contribution is needed to fund the plan, and then you have, when you retire, a benefit which is predefined based upon your age and years of service and your final average earnings. So it doesn't matter how well the investment of plan funds went. They could have made tremendous returns or very poor returns. You could retire in an up economy or a down economy. It doesn't make any difference. Your pension is going to be set purely based upon those factors. What your final average earnings are, how many years of service you have. That's pretty much going to, at your age, when you retire, that's going to determine what your retirement looks like. That's a defined benefit plan. Your benefit is predefined. The other kind of benefit of so-called pension, and many people say it's not really a pension, it's just a form of 401k, is a defined contribution plan. That's the alternative retirement plan is a defined contribution plan. That means that you know what your contribution is going to be, and you know what the employer's contribution is going to be. And in our plan, it's 5% for you and 8% for the employer. But you have absolutely no idea what your retirement's going to be. It'll be based when you retire on how much the investment of those funds is produced. So it is dependent on your skill, it's dependent on your luck, and it depends on the overall economic situation. The same person could have been equally brilliant and equally lucky in his or her investments in 2006 and retired with a pretty good portfolio, and then if it turned out the person was retiring instead in 2007, or right when the market dropped, really bad portfolio. And so your retirement depends upon the investment returns, and your contribution was defined, therefore it's a defined contribution plan, but your benefit is completely uncertain. So that's the alternate retirement plan. So in the recent discussions with the administration, which led to CBAC 2011, we created the hybrid. And why did we do that? Well, here's the thing about defined benefit plans. Defined benefit plans are skewed for long service workers. If you have a lot of time with an employer, they tend to be by far the most efficient way to produce a retirement income. They are certainly the only way to produce a predefined retirement income. That's by definition what a defined benefit plan is. But in all honesty, they've always been skewed for long service workers. You work for an employer for 5 or 6 years, and then you leave. You've gotten almost nothing out of the contributions that were made by you or in your name for those 5 or 6 years in a defined benefit plan. Even if you work for that employer for 10, 11, 12 years, it typically tends to be a pretty low pension that you end up with. And part of that is that defined benefits are, one of the factors I talked about is your final average earnings, right? Well, your final average earnings, if you retire from a particular employer after 30 years of employment, your final average earnings are what you're earning when you retire, right? That makes a lot of sense. But if you actually work for an employer, let's say you come here at age 23 and you work for 12 years and then go somewhere else, well, your final average earnings are going to be what you were earning at age 35 from this institution. Even if you've gone to work for the University of Alaska and are now making, 4 or 5 times that much when you turn, let's say, age 62 and decide to retire. Your final average earnings are very, very low. So defined benefit plans are skewed for long service workers who are retiring from the particular employer that's providing the pension. Okay? And that's how we set up the service plan. The alternative retirement plan, it doesn't matter whether you're long service, short service. It's all about how long you invest in it and how well the returns go. That's it. So for some short-term workers, if you knew you were coming to Connecticut State University and were going to work for only 6 years, you knew for sure when you started you were only going to work for 6 years, you're probably better off in the Army most of the time. Now you might be a person who's totally risk averse and doesn't want to take any risk with your investments, but just join the ARP. You're going to get that 13%, 5%, of your own money, 8% from the employer. You know you're going to leave in 5 or 6 years. Maybe you put it in some sort of annuity plan. You're not going to get rich, but you're going to get that 5% back when you leave. You're going to get that 8% back in whatever your little investment returns. It's probably the best you can do in 5 or 6 years, better than you would do at CSRS. So the problem we have is that an employee needs to make a decision between these two very different retirement choices. Hugely important decision, and because of the rules of the Internal Revenue Service, you need to make that decision an irrevocable decision when you're hired, or within a brief period of time after you're hired. So a typical person, and forget about someone who's been here 30 years already, and I'll talk about that in a second, but someone starts tomorrow, and they're 23 or 30 years old, and has no bloody clue if they're going to be here for the next 30, 40 years, or they're going to leave a couple of years from now. They don't know if they're going to get tenure. They don't know if their husband or their wife is going to get tenure or whatever else they're doing. It might, move to be with family in some other state or whatever. How do you tell them which of these choices? Should they take the ARP? Should they take the CSRS? They don't have the information necessary to make an intelligent decision, maybe one of the most important decisions in their life. They do not have the information necessary to make that decision, and no one can give it to them. Because no one knows if they're going to make tenure. No one knows if they're going to be here for 5, 6, 7, 12 years or 30 or 40. So the purpose of the hybrid plan was to allow those people who were not sure if they were short-term or long-term employees when they came to be hired, to hedge their bets, to get the benefits of a defined benefit plan and still have some of the advantages of a defined contribution plan for short service people if it turns out that they're not going to be here forever. So all the hybrid plan says is, look, when you're hired, you can choose ARP, as you always could. You could choose CSRS as you always could. And if you knew for sure whether you were going to be short-term or long-term, you could make one of those choices. But if you're not sure, as most people are probably not sure, you can choose the hybrid plan. You get exactly the same benefits as the CSRS plan when you retire. Exactly the same. You pay 3% more employee contribution. And for that 3%, you get one extra thing. All of the contributions that are made by you and a matching amount by the employer and a guaranteed 4% interest on those two things are yours to cash out when you want to. So if it turns out you're a short service worker, 10, 12 years, you're almost certainly going to be better off cashing that money out. Treating it as a defined benefit plan, even though you could, probably isn't going to get you much of a pension. Because again, you started at, let's say, 25, and you work for 12 years, now you're 37 when you leave, and you're not going to collect your pension until you're 55 or 62 or whatever it is. Your salary is so low as compared to the salaries of those days that your pension is likely to be extremely low. You're probably better off with the cash out option. So for that additional option, which SERS participants don't have, you pay the extra 3% that SERS participants wouldn't pay. So we feel pretty good that it's a very good way of hedging your bets for new employees. And for most new employees, you know, if someone were to ask me, and I don't give individual retirement advice, but if someone were to ask me, new employees, I would say, you know what, you're probably, unless you really have a crystal ball, the best way to hedge your bets is with a hybrid. You know, yeah, if it turns out that you're here for 30, 40 years, you paid 3% that you didn't have to pay. That's true. But on the other hand, if it turns out you're only here for 10 or 12 years, you've gotten yourself a decent return on for when you go somewhere else. Now, some people may say, nope, I absolutely want to be in the SERS, or no, I actually want to be in ARP, and of course that's up to them. We've now given them 3 choices instead of just 2, and at least we've given them a way that this one-time irrevocable choice isn't so startling. Okay? So that's what you talk about for new employees. That was one of the purposes of creating the hybrid. But there was a whole other purpose of creating the hybrid that probably affects most of you much more. As you know, we had done the SAG Award, which was designed to allow people who had been in ARP to transfer at any point in their career, as long as they did it within what we thought was going to be a pretty quick window, to transfer to the SERS plan, if they wanted to. And the idea was, as you all know, that a lot of you who've been here a long time were not given the accurate information about the differences between the 2 types of plans and made choices that you later came to regret. Some of you were not even given a choice. Some of you were pretty much told, you know, if you want to work here, you take the ARP plan. So it wasn't that you made the wrong choice, it was that you effectively didn't have a choice. And so the idea of the SAG Award was to remedy that as much as we could by giving people in ARP the opportunity to take their ARP proceeds and buy into the SERS plan and get as many years of past service credit as their ARP proceeds and 401, 403B and 457 would buy. So as you all know, that SAG Award is stalled because we were given legal advice that the Internal Revenue Service might not allow that. And there's a letter been sent to the Internal Revenue Service saying, would you please let us know whether it's okay? That's essentially, it's a lot longer than that, but pretty much that's what it says. The Internal Revenue Service will answer in its normal, speedy fashion, which we expect to be about another year or so. Okay, so that's what's going on with the SAG Award. In the discussions, the 2011 discussions with the administration, we saw an opportunity to at least do something about that, because by creating a hybrid, we've created a new plan choice that did not exist at the time when you all were hired, those of you who are not brand new employees. And so as a result, the Internal Revenue Service says, well, you're allowed to make a new choice. The question that the Internal Revenue Service is being asked about the SAG Award is, are you allowed to change your mind? Because these are supposed to be one-time irrevocable choices. You chose ARP, now you want to move to SERS. That's changing your mind. But if you're choosing the hybrid, you're not changing your mind. You didn't have the hybrid as a choice when you were hired. So the Internal Revenue Service says, well, you can allow people to switch to a new plan which was not available at the time they were hired. And that's why we can implement the hybrid immediately and don't have to wait for the Internal Revenue Service to tell us it's okay. All right? So that meant we were able to give you all at least some of the benefit of the SAG Award without waiting for the Internal Revenue Service to rule. Now, there's one little glitch about that I want to tell you. How many people here were hired before 1997? So this glitch affects a lot of you all. What we did when we created the hybrid plan is we said that you're going to, if you shift into it, you're going to pay 3% more than the equivalent tier you would have been in when you were hired. Okay? So if you would have been in Tier 2, like those of you who were hired before 1997, Tier 2 is 0% employee contribution. So you should pay 3. 0 plus 3 is, my math's good enough for that. If you were going to be in Tier 2A, meaning you're hired after 1997, you would have paid 2% anyway. Now you're going to pay 2 plus 3 is 5. Okay, and that's what we said, and that was what was agreed to by the administration. And that was okay with the Internal Revenue Code as we understood it when we reached the agreement. Since then, the Internal Revenue Service has changed its view, and they've said, if you're choosing a new plan, that's okay. You can change your mind. You're not really changing your mind. You can change your plan because it wasn't available at the time that you were hired. So that's okay. But you have to have the employee contribution, the mandatory employee contribution, be at least as much as the old plan. Okay? So your ARP plan, your mandatory contribution was 5%. Right? If you're one of these people who would have been hired in before 1997, your hybrid contribution should be 3%, 0 plus 3. Well, 3 is less than 5, and the Internal Revenue Service won't allow that. So in order to fix that, we signed an agreement with the administration just a week ago, because that's about when we got the advice. It was like 10 days ago. We signed an agreement with the administration that says if you are one of these, you're one of the people who just raised your hands, and you switch into the hybrid, you're going to be paying 5%. But so that you don't get ripped off, 3% of it's going to go into the normal state employees retirement fund, and 2% is going to go into your ARP. So you're paying yourself. And that's how we got around this, because otherwise the lawyers told us we would have had to apply for a waiver from the Internal Revenue Service, and you all could be sitting around for another 2.5 years while we waited for the Internal Revenue Service to tell us it was okay. So you're getting the benefit of being in Tier 2 rather than Tier 2A, but you're paying the 2% to yourself into your ARP fund. So that's that. The only other thing I want to just cover really generally, and then we'll just ask questions. People have said, okay, well, if I'm buying in, now I can buy in right away to the hybrid plan, or I can wait, and I can wait and see what the IRS does about the SAG award. And so, should I wait? And obviously that's an individual decision, but there's a set of things I can say generally, okay, which is this. There are only two differences between these two plans. So for you to make the decision about whether to wait or not to wait, you have to decide how these two differences affect you. So let's talk about the two differences. One is you're going to pay 3% more if you're in the hybrid plan than you would if you shifted to service, right? All right, well, let's say you're saying to yourself, look, I'm going to buy into one of these plans and then I'm going to retire the next year. Well, guess what? If you're going to retire the next year, that 3% more, you're only paying it for a year. So there's virtually no difference for you between the hybrid and the SAG award. There's not much reason to wait if you're about to switch in and retire. Because the only downside was this extra 3%, which you're not paying because you're retired. Okay, so that's one set of factors. The other set of factors is that if you use money to buy past service credit, remember that the hybrid option, your money is always 100% vested in terms of you could always get it out. You can always cash out. Okay? Whereas if you switch into SERS, there are vesting rules. So let me be a little more specific about that. Right? Let's say that you decide that you're going to buy 2 years of past service credit, so you're going to buy in unvested, right? Because 2 years in the SAG award, going into SERS, you need 5-year vesting. Okay? So you go in unvested, and then you leave without having hit your 5 years. You'll get back that money, the money you've bought in. So you'd say, well, that's not then a big difference. But the other thing that happens to people is, unfortunately, they leave or they pass away before they are eligible to retire. Okay? And under the SERS plan, because of the vesting, it's not technically vesting rules, it's the pre-retirement death benefit. Under the SERS plan, if you were to pass away before you retire, you don't get the benefit of the employer's contributions. You get your contributions back. Or your spouse gets, or whoever. Your beneficiary gets your contributions back. You don't get anything. But your beneficiary gets your contributions back. But your beneficiary doesn't get the benefit of the employer contributions. Okay, that's the pre-retirement death benefit. There are a few complicated exceptions, but we don't need to worry about that here. If you buy into the SAG award, let's say you buy 25 years of credit, okay, and then you were to pass away before you retire, what the comptroller's office will do is they'll take, and let's say you put in $300,000 to buy that credit. They're going to give you, in terms of you're going to give your spouse 5/13 of that $300,000. Because under SERS, you get back the value of your contributions from pre-retirement death benefit, but you don't get the value of your employer's contributions. So there's some risk under the SAG award. And that's one of the reasons we've said to people, frankly, you need to look at, if you're going to, when we finally implement the SAG award, we're going to have we're going to make them reissue your life insurance options, because you might want to up your life insurance, because frankly, under the SERS plan, pre-retirement death benefit's not very good. Okay, so I see people nodding. I'm assuming everybody's following that. Under the hybrid, If you buy in $300,000 worth and you pass away before you retire, you get the full credit of that $300,000 because the hybrid has the full cash out option. So your spouse could cash out that $300,000 plus any of the contributions you made and were matched in the 4% from the time you switched over. So there is this extra safety in the hybrid plan, which comes from the fact that it's a special defined contribution plan we create. Okay. So if you're deciding, should I wait for the SAG award, not to wait for the SAG award, for the IRS to rule on the SAG award, or should I take the hybrid now? Those are the two critical factors on which you should make your decision. And it doesn't mean that there's an easy answer. You know, for some people, maybe, to me, it's a really, it's an easy answer. If you're planning on retiring next month, why wait, right? I mean, the only downside is that 3% contribution for a month. So it's easy for that person. If you're planning on being here another 10 years, so the downside of the hybrid is that 3% contribution over the 10 years. That's the downside, right? As compared to CSRS. But the upside is this certainty of the month. So those are the key factors you ought to be thinking. So with that said, Steve, unless there was something in... Oh, I know, I was going to just tell you. People want to know, well, when the hell is this thing going to get implemented? The latest I know is that they're now anticipating and hopeful that the estimators will be up and ready to go next week. They're not guaranteeing it. They're telling me as of 5 minutes before this meeting that they are very hopeful that will happen. They're telling me they think that tomorrow, by tomorrow, I'll be able to tell you for sure one way or the other whether it will be next week. And I'll get that out to all the union leaders by tomorrow. But that's what they know. The complication has been making sure the estimators work right. Because the last thing we want to do is have the estimators be wrong and you all make a decision about your life and it turns out to be the wrong decision because you were given the wrong information. We've been through that before. So that's what we are told that the holdup is, hopefully next week. So that's it. And Steve, are you going to call people since you know names?
Well, we can do that, but I just want to point on the documents that you picked up. One of the important documents is the piece of paper that talks about the plan highlight charts, the information that's available currently on the controller's website. That's where you're going to find pretty much all of the information, in addition to that calculator estimator that Dan just talked about. But on there are a number of these documents that have been also prepared and are here for as handouts. But it's important to go on to the controller's website so you get comfortable, can read the information that's there, and then as soon as the estimator calculator, no, that's a copy of the current Q&A.